Welcome to Train Signal. This is the Windows 2003 Terminal Services Setup video. The goal of this video is to show you how to set up and use terminal services in an environment with both Windows 2000 and Windows 2003. We're also going to walk you through the differences between Windows 2000 and 2003 terminal services and show you a lot of the new features in 2003 as well. Now realize that terminal services offers the administrator a great feature to manage servers and remote users' desktops. And the reason for this is because it eliminates trips down to the server closet or to the remote user. And as far as a lab setup environment like we're doing, it also cuts down on clutter as well. From one system, I can manage 3, 4, 10 different servers without having all the keyboards and monitors and mice. Okay, before we get started with the actual configuration of terminal services, you need to have a general idea of the topology of the network. Okay, whether it's this network or your own network that you're working on. Okay, because if we take a look, this is a representation of what we're going to be working with in this Mega Lab series, and also can resemble something that you might be setting up at home. Now in this diagram here, we have a couple hubs, and we have several different network IDs, 2 to be precise. Okay, we see that these 2 machines here are marked, and they have the network ID of 192.168.1 and 192.168.1 as well here. Okay, so these 2 machines on this side of the network form one network ID. Now in this side of SRV1, as this machine is marked, it has an IP address of 15.15.15.15 with an 8-bit subnet mask. Okay, indicating that this machine is on network ID 15. This machine as well is also on network ID 15, so these 2 machines are able to communicate. Now, this machine and this machine can communicate, and this server can communicate, but can this machine communicate all the way over here? Meaning, can this machine communicate through the hub, through SRV1, through the hub, and back down to SRV11? And that all depends on whether or not we have routing enabled on this machine. Okay, so I'm just going to mark this with an R right now. And by default, routing is not enabled. And if that's the case, Client 1 will be able to ping SRV1, and SRV1 will be able to ping SRV11, but Client 1 will not be able to ping all the way through to that machine if data back and forth. Okay, so if you can't ping all the way through here, there is no way that terminal services is going to work as well. So what you're going to see here in my diagram, I've got this set up, and I've already turned routing on. Okay, so that's what's going to allow me to terminal service and connect through SRV1 to get down to SRV11. When you're first setting this up on your own network, it's very possible, okay, that maybe you don't turn routing on here, and you just go directly to SRV11, configure this machine individually. Okay, so the way I'm going to be showing you right now is a little bit different. Now, in addition to this network, I also have a second network hooked up that's running XP and 2003. Okay, so a little bit confusing. Let me explain what's going on here. This machine here is actually a server running Windows 2003, and it has 2 network cards. One's plugged into this hub here, and another one's plugged into this hub down here. Okay, and routing is turned on this machine, so it is able to forward information between this machine here, going through the router, through the hub, and these X's are 3 different machines that make up part of my Windows 2003 XP network. So what we're going to demonstrate, I'm going to show you a couple examples. I'm going to be running all the videos, and this is where we're currently at right now, is on Client 1. Okay, and we're going to be connecting over to SRV1, SRV11, just demonstrating how we can connect there. We're going to focus on connecting to these machines down here. Okay, so we'll demonstrate how this goes through here, and you need to understand this as well. Now, you don't have to have this complex of a network and setup when you're at home, but this here allows me to maintain my 2000 network and 2003, and it just adds simplicity, believe it or not, adds simplicity to the fact of, teaching both 2000 and 2003 at the same time. Okay, let's get started with this then. So we're going to demonstrate this from a Windows 2000 professional machine. And that's the machine we have running right here. This is a Windows 2000 professional machine with Windows 2000, the terminal service client for Windows 2000 installed. Okay, so if we look through here, go down to Terminal Services Client, I see that I've got my just default Windows 2000 terminal service client installed. And this can be installed off of a floppy disk or from a network share from a Windows 2000 server. In addition to that, I use this Client Connection Manager here to manage all of my terminal services connections. And what we're going to do is just demonstrate a little bit and show you how I can connect from my Pro machine. I can connect over to Windows 2000 servers. Okay, that's what these two machines are here. Or I can connect to an XP machine, or I can connect to my two Windows 2003 machines. Any of these machines I can connect to with my Windows 2000 terminal service client. Okay, so remember, from here, this is where we're initiating this whole process. We're going to be connecting to our Windows 2000 machines here, and the only reason I can connect to this machine is because I have routing enabled. And I'm also going to be connecting this way just down to my XP machines and my 2003. So we'll document that a little bit more once we get to that connection. So let's start first by connecting over to SRV1, just demonstrate a couple points. And this should be no big deal. This is very similar to what we demonstrated in the last lab when I was showing you that in the Terminal Services lab. And if you look here, I've got the administrator username supplied, and you do have to supply a password. And one thing to note, remember this is in remote administration mode. Okay, there is a full-fledged terminal service server that you can install on Windows 2000 Server, and that's not what this is. Okay, the only user that can log on to a remote administration mode machine is an administrator. Okay, so if my user account is part of the administrator group, I'll have the ability to log on to this machine. Okay, and this here demonstrates. You can tell we've got a different blue background, SRV1, just what I've renamed it to, and it shows Windows 2000 Terminal. Okay, so we're connected right now to a Windows 2000 server. And we walked through this previously, but remember, when you're installing terminal services on Windows 2000, remember it's done through Control Panel, Add Remove Programs, Add Remove Windows Components, and then once this pops up, you need to go down to the Terminal Services and then select that box. Okay, so you have to install Terminal Services. When you click Next through here, we have selected Remote Administration Mode. So that's how I set it up on this Windows 2000 server, and this is what we demonstrated previously in the Windows 2000 Terminal Services video. So I'm just going to cancel this because I obviously already have it installed, so there's no reason for me to reinstall it. And I'm going to log off this session and go back down to our Windows 2000 Pro machine here again. Okay, next we're going to take a look at connecting to the XP client. See how that's a little bit different. Now, first things first, we had that confusing topology before, okay, and this is what we have set up initially. And then in addition to that, remember that we have a cable coming down, and I've got a Windows 2003 machine acting as a router, and there's 3 more computers over here. So we don't really need to worry too much about those, honestly. You just realize that the network topology has been set up and configured, meaning the hubs are plugged in, the physical capability, the physical connections are there, and then TCP/IP has to be configured as well. Okay, so anytime you have different network IDs, routing just has to be configured so machines can get from one location, one network, to a different network. Okay, once you have that set up correctly, and the default rule of thumb is if you can ping on a local network, most likely Terminal Services is going to work as well. Okay, so we're not going to worry too much about the physical topology because we want to focus on Terminal Services right now. But that's where we're going right now. We're starting from this machine before we connected over here to SRV1, and now we're going to go from Client 1 through a Windows 2003 router, okay, through another hub here, which connects over to my XP machine. Okay, so we'll come back over here, and this is being done, remember, from a Windows 2000 client. And I point that out here because we're going to notice a difference later on when I show you the new feature within Windows XP in 2003. Notice the screen color here. The graphic seems to be a little bit non-vivid, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I'm going to log on. Okay, and no problem whatsoever. I'm able to connect to my XP machine, and I've tried to differentiate each of these different systems with a different name. So I've just renamed my computer. You can see that this one is named XP-Client 1 and still says Windows Terminal Server because we've got a terminal session set up. But if you're familiar at all with XP, you should recognize some of the new features here. Okay, so this is indeed running XP. Now, to enable terminal services in XP, first off, realize that this is new because in Windows 2000 Pro, terminal services isn't available, meaning you can't connect remotely to your Windows 2000 Pro computer. Okay, with XP though, they've turned it on. But instead of being called terminal services, in Windows XP, it's now called Remote Desktop. So if you right-click on my computer, go to Properties, and then you should have a Remote tab. Okay, and this is right here, this feature you'll find right here, Remote Desktop. And I've checked it. By default, it is unchecked, allowing users to connect remotely to this computer. Okay, and here's the computer name, just so you know. And then a listing of the users who can connect. And this is really important for a couple reasons. Okay, reason number one is for security. Okay, if you start adding users here, if anybody can connect, then people are going to be able to manage your machine remotely, and even in a secured environment like a local area network, that's not very secure. Okay, and reason number two, you need to watch this and monitor this, because if you try to log on with a different user account, you might think things are not working properly. And in Indeed, it tells you right here, administrator already has access. Okay, so there's no reason to click Add here and go hunting for a different user. Okay, so we're going to leave that as it is. So when you enable this, the only thing you really have to do is click this checkbox, click OK, and then you're all set. Okay, and you've enabled Remote Desktop. Now, from here, things are a little bit different. Okay, if you look up here, I'm going to now disconnect from this. Okay, and we're going to go back to our Windows 2000 Pro machine eventually. And then once again, we're going to connect, before we went through the Windows 2003 router to the XP machine, we're going to go one step further, okay, and just go, it's actually connected to the same hub, and we're going to connect to the Windows 2003 SRV1. Okay, and if you didn't realize already, this is pretty much how this network is set up. It's to mirror this network we have up here. Okay, so we have an XP Client 1, there's a Windows 2003 SRV1, and a Windows 2003 SRV11. And each of these systems, okay, are connected through a hub, just like you see up here, with this machine acting as the router between the two different networks. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to connect over to our Windows 2003 SRV1. Okay, so let's minimize this, and that's this machine right here. Okay, so I double-click this, and it connects me out here. Once again, notice the graphics. Okay, they look a little bit weak when we look at these. That's because they are. We'll check this out once we get in here. Okay, so I log on with the password of password. And when we look here, still graphics look a little weak. When you go to Properties, Settings, notice the color quality. Okay, low, 8 bits, and I can't change this. Okay, there's no way for me to change this within this tool. This is because of the actual client that we're using to connect. Later on in this video, we're going to connect with a more robust, newer client that's designed specifically for Windows 2003 and XP, and you'll see a drastic difference in the colors. Okay, so one more thing I want to demonstrate here, okay, because this is a problem that happens a lot of times. Right now, you see that I had a password from my administrator. What we're going to do, so once again, we're on that 2003 machine, SRV1. I'm going to change the user account on this machine. Just want to show you something here. Okay, here's my administrator account. And if I set the password on this machine, just go ahead and click Proceed, to a blank password. Okay, so, and obviously you know that with an administrator account, you never want a blank password. Okay, but sometimes when you're setting things up, it's a home network where you're just checking things out, testing stuff out. A lot of times you'll set the password as blank for your administrator account. Okay, so I've set that blank. I'm now going to log off onto that machine again. Okay, it's in the background here. Okay, blank password, right? So I just changed that. Okay, unable to log on because you have an account restriction. Okay, and this is something that catches people off guard a lot, but there's a group policy setting. Okay, there's a group policy setting that must be actually enabled. If you don't enable that, then you have to set a password for your administrator account. Okay, so it's a good setting. The policy itself just won't allow a remote logon that does not have a password. Okay, so I'm going to have to stop this. Okay, I've gone to the point where I've locked myself out, so I literally have to go now over to that machine and adjust this setting back again. I'm going to have to set the administrator password back with a password so I can log back onto this machine. So I'm going to stop the video, and I'm going to go take care of that, and then I'll be right back, and we'll go forward from there. Okay, we're back up and running here. And once again, we're sitting on our Windows 2000 professional system, kind of our base, our launching point. And what we want to do now is go take a look at that Windows 2003 machine once again, and kind of look at why we weren't able to connect before. Just go into that in more detail. Now remember, when we connected before, we supplied a password and we were denied access when we had a blank password. So I literally had to go over to this machine, log on locally, and change the password back to a password. And I'm just using the password of password, just to keep things simple. And now I have access here once again. Okay, in this setting, you really have two choices. Your remote user, when it's connecting to this machine, either has to have a password, which of course is a good idea, or if you really don't want a password, I'm going to show you a group policy setting. And this, lab's not on group policy, but we'll take a quick look at this just as an overview. Now you have two choices. You can set this either within your local policy, like I am here, and that's because this machine is not a domain controller and it's not part of a domain. So I'm just setting it locally. It's a locally specific setting to this server only. And the setting I want is right here, actually. Okay, if I open this up, I see that this says accounts, limit local account use of blank passwords to console login only. Okay, and the console login, you need to understand what that is. That's a local login to a local machine. Okay, so when you physically walk up to a machine, log on locally, that's considered logging onto the console. When I'm trying to log on to a machine across the network, like I am with terminal services, that is not a console login. That's considered a remote login. Okay, so if I don't want this policy on, I can disable it, and this would allow me to use blank passwords even when I'm not at the console. Okay, allowing me to use blank passwords when I log on remotely. Okay, I'm going to leave this kind of like the idea of having a password when I'm logging on remotely. Okay, so I'm going to leave that setting and then close this here. Now, one more thing we want to look at while we're here on this server is the fact of how terminal services is installed. Okay, with Windows 2000, recall that we actually had to go to our add remove Windows components, go down to terminal services and install terminal services in remote administration mode. And that's different in Windows 2003. Okay, in Windows 2003, notice here that terminal server is not installed. Okay, and I don't need to install it. I mean, we're connected to this machine right now, and this is not installed. Okay, so this here, when you select this, this is the full-fledged version of terminal services. And this is when you can manage applications remotely. This allows you to turn your system basically into an application server. Okay, so we're not going to go into that right now. We want to focus on our terminal services in remote administration mode. So we'll cancel this. And we'll talk about how we actually turn this machine into a terminal server in remote administration mode. And it's real simple. Okay, it's just like we did in XP. We right-click My Computer, go to the Remote tab, and then we just select this checkbox here. Allow users to connect remotely to this computer. Okay, and then we have the ability to select these users. In this case, I have no users selected, so the only person who has access is the default administrator account. Okay, so let's go ahead and log off here. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the remote desktop client. Okay, and the remote desktop client is an alternative to what we're currently using. Right now, we're able to connect out to Windows 2000 servers, XP machines, and Windows 2003 machines by using this Windows 2000 Terminal Services client. Okay, and that's what you see here. Here's the actual client individually itself. We didn't really use this one, but we used a larger version of it. We just used the individual Terminal Services clients for each of our different connections. Okay, instead of using that, we're going to use the Remote Desktop Client tool that comes with Windows XP and Windows 2003. Now, to install this tool, you can either put a Windows 2003 CD in, as I just did. Oops, try that again. Okay, or you can put in a Windows XP CD. Either one of those are going to work. And demonstrate the options as soon as the auto run kicks in here. And this is an evaluation copy of Windows 2003, so it works fine with this as well. And you don't want to install anything. Okay, as far as the operating system is concerned, you want to click on Perform Additional Tasks. Okay, and from here, I see right there that I've got Set Up Remote Desktop Connection. Okay, if I click this, it takes me through the actual installation process of installing this. Okay, now I'm going to cancel this out for right now. just because I want to show you one other option we have in this. And the reason I do that, I'm not the type, and as an administrator you may not be either, the type who really likes to carry a CD around with them, or feel that you have to have the CD anytime you're trying to install anything. So instead of doing that, just like with Windows 2000, we can share this client from the network. So if we connect back over to our Windows 2003 system once again, I'm going to browse and I'm going to show you exactly where this client is shared from. Okay, so this is my computer. Don't be misled. I've just renamed this. Okay, here's my C drive. And I open up my Windows folder. Okay, that's a difference between Windows 2003 and Windows 2000. In Windows 2000, this would be what? The Win and T folder, right? Okay, so you got to make sure that you go to the right folder. Go down through Windows, and I'm going to go to my System32 folder. I open that up, and just like in Windows 2000, I've got a clients folder. Okay, I open that up, and I see that I got a couple other clients here. I'm not going to worry about those. But I've already shared out my TS client. This was not done by default. I shared this myself, just by going to Sharing, share this folder, and then pay attention to your permissions as well. Okay, I've got everyone set up as read, which is perfectly fine for this particular client. Okay, so I've shared that out. I'm now going to log off this machine and just get back over to our Windows 2000 base system. Now, I've got two choices once again. I can either install off of the CD, or I can install off of the network share. Okay, and in this case, I'm just going to install from the network share, and I'm going to do that by entering a universal naming convention, UNC path, //, and I'm going to specify the IP address of that server. Okay, and it just happens to be 192.168.10.201. Okay, and I see here's the only share on that machine is that TS client. So I double click this, I keep clicking through here, and go to the setup. And this is going to be the exact same setup that we just saw with the CD-ROM, so it really doesn't matter which one you choose to install when you're using this tool. Next, accept the agreement, assuming that you read the entire thing, of course. Okay, username, organization, whatever you want to put up there. Click Install to begin the installation. So I click Install, and you see the installation take. Click Finish when you're done. Nice, quick installation. Okay, and now let's go take a look at how this is different. You can access the remote desktop client by going to Start, Programs, and then right down here in the initial Programs menu, you see that you have Remote Desktop Connection. Okay, so I click Remote Desktop Connection, and now I've got different systems that I can connect over to. Okay, and this is a little bit confusing at first because it's just a different interface. But I see IP addresses for machines that I've previously connected to within the Windows 2000 Terminal Service Client. Another thing to notice here, this is the window that I was using before when I was using the Windows 2000 Terminal Service Client. And when I try to connect out here again, it no longer works. Okay, so keep that in mind. Pretty much disables your ability to use this tool, so there's no reason to even use that anymore. Okay, so here I'm back to my remote desktop connection, and let's take a look at our options here, what we can actually do with this. Drag this up here a little bit, and this shows us the different connections that I have, or different options I have for my connection. Okay, first I have the computer option. I can specify which computer I want to select or browse out to. Okay, if I browse, you're typically not going to see anything unless you have a local connection, okay, like a local system that's running terminal services, like we see here, but I don't see all the different systems that I have in my network. So typically I like to use an IP address when we're using this here. So we have IP address, we can supply a username and a password, and this is different than Windows 2000. In the Windows 2000 Terminal Service Client, if you supply your username and password, it still requires you to enter your username and password. Okay, well in Windows 2003 with this remote desktop connection, I can now enter my username and password and it works. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Other things, display, I can control if I want full screen or smaller. The color, local resources, and this is new to Windows 2003, I can literally bring sound from the system. So you'll see when I log on to this XP system, it brings the sound forward into this session. So I'll actually hear the login when I log on to XP. This is the same. I can start an individual program when I start my remote administration mode if I want to. And then here we have our experience. And what they mean by this is what kind of connection do you actually have? Okay, is it a slow 56K connection? Okay, or do we have a faster connection? So if I wanted to, I can select local area network here, and you see that it allows me, or it automatically will select all of these down here as well. Okay, so the point is if you have a slow connection, let's say a 56K modem connection, this stuff is going to take way too long to transfer over the internet or over your modem connection. So in this case, you're going to sacrifice seeing this stuff. Since I have a local area connection, all of these are then selected. Let's focus in on our general setting right here. Okay, and the first machine we'll connect over to, it's going to be our XP machine. Okay, and that's located at 192.168.10.1. So I select that machine. Username, okay, is administrator, so I don't have to change this. I'm going to change the password field here, so it's password once again. And for domain name, there really isn't a domain name because this machine's not in a domain. And I'll check the Save My Password box. And you've got to be careful with this because you don't want to give somebody access to a system. So realistically, in a real-world environment, probably not a real good idea to save your password. Okay, even though it might be a pain for you to log on every time, it's worth the extra security. So I click Connect. Okay. And you see now that I've got a connection. Okay, kind of cool here. Got a tab up here, and this is the actual full screen view of my XP system. Okay, you can see it's XP Client 1. I've got my normal XP Windows. Okay, and then up here, this is kind of a tab to get back to the actual system that we started from. So for example, if I hit the minimize button, that takes me back to the base system, okay, the system that I'm actually got the remote desktop connection installed on. Okay, if I want to open that back up and work on the XP system again, okay, now I can work back in the system. Okay, so very, very handy when it comes to actually managing these systems. The other thing I can do, just like in Windows 2003, or Windows 2000, I'm sorry, I can set up multiple connections. Okay, so if I open up this remote desktop connection again, this time let's connect out to the Windows 2003 server, which is at 211. Okay, let's change the password to the appropriate password. And this time I'm going to uncheck the Save Password box just to show you. Okay, and taking some time here. You need to most likely supply a password, okay, since I unchecked the Save My Password box. Client computer could not connect to remote computer. Remote connections might not be enabled, or the computer might be too busy to accept new connections. Okay, so this could happen. You might see this, by the way, if you had a situation where there were more than 2 sessions on a computer. So for example, I'm trying to connect to this Windows 2003 server here. If there are 2 other administrators, or I left open sessions there, that would prevent me from logging on like I just tried. Okay, now, I don't think that's the case here, so what I'll have to do is just do a little bit of troubleshooting. Take a look, and most likely, it looks like what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to connect to that 211 machine. That's not the one I'm trying to connect to. It should be 201, so I misspecified my IP address. Okay, so administrator, that looks good, password, and I click Connect. Okay, now in this case, it connected right over, and there's no issue. Okay, so now you see this is my 2003 SRV1 machine, and if I look up here, it tells me exactly what IP address I'm connected to, and this would be the connection name or the IP address. I can minimize it, take me back to my base system. Then I've got both of these sessions open. I can actually work on either one of these servers. Okay, so here I'm not in a full screen window, where down below I actually see my other windows. So I can flip back and forth if I wanted to between my 2 sessions. Okay, so you see that? Down here, this is my taskbar for my Windows 2000 Professional System, the base system. If you click this Show Desktop button here, it takes me right to this desktop. Okay, then when I open up this session, this takes me to my XP session, this takes me to my 2003 session, so now I have the ability to see all 3 of these machines fairly quickly. Okay? So a real handy tool, and we're not limited either. I can set up connections to all the other servers if I want to. Okay, your only limitation really is how many people can connect at one given time to just one server. Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to connect out to 201. Okay, now I have a third connection. Okay, so I'm going to choose this middle option here, and now you see I've got these 3 different options to choose from. Okay, so as I was saying a second ago, it doesn't matter how many machines I connect to. It's just pick out one machine. For example, this 2003 server, only 2 people can connect to this one machine at any one given time. Last thing we want to take a look at in this video is the difference between disconnecting and logging off a session. And you need to make sure that you really understand this. Okay, when I open up a terminal service session once again, so I've got my remote desktop client connected, let's see what we can do here. Okay, I've got my choices between disconnecting or logging off. And most people have no clue what the difference is. But when you disconnect, it makes a real big difference because you're leaving your session open. For example, I'm going to go ahead and open up, let's see here, Internet Explorer. We won't have a connection, but we can open it up anyway. And we'll open up Notepad. Okay, and just leave these 2 programs open up down here in the taskbar. And I'm going to disconnect my session. Okay, are you sure you want to disconnect? Yes. Okay, so I've disconnected. When I come back up here again, I'm going to go out to that same XP machine. Okay, that's click Connect. Logs me on, and notice what's there. I still have both of these programs open. So when you disconnect, you're literally leaving a session wide open. Your username is still going to be connected to it. It's going to count as one of the 2 remote administration sessions that you get against that server. Okay, so it's real good if you're just trying to, even relocate yourself to a different system where you want to manage the session from. So what I'm trying to say is I can disconnect from my current system, go across the hall, log on to a different system, and reconnect over to that system with the same username and password. And it's going to pull up this, Notepad screen and Internet Explorer, and it's going to continue the session that I had, disconnected from before. Okay, so when you disconnect, you are not ending your session. When we log off, now we are ending our session. Okay, I went ahead and closed those programs, but logging off would cancel those programs. So it's a good idea, anytime you're ending a bunch of sessions, make sure that you always stipulate log off instead of just disconnecting. Okay, so now I come back here again, and you may wonder why I click up here first. Well, if I click this Start button, this is actually the Start menu for my base system, my Windows 2000 Pro system down here. Okay, so when I have this view, okay, the view where I've got it in the middle mode, I need to maximize it first, which shows me a full screen mode of my server, and then I need to go over and then log off. Okay, and you can tell right here what operating system you're actually running. It tells me. Okay, so now I'm going to log off. I'm going to do the same thing for my third system as well. Okay. First I got to go up here and maximize, right? Okay, shows me my terminal session, and now I'm going to log off. Log off administrator. Okay, and that takes me back to our desktop here. In this video, we talked about the differences between Windows 2000 and Windows 2003 terminal services. We focused on the features of Windows 2003 terminal services to ensure that you understand how to install them and how to set this up in remote administration mode. Keep in mind that with Windows 2003, you no longer have to install terminal services, but just have to check the remote desktop checkbox in order to enable this. This feature is going to be a great help in this Mega Lab series as well as your administration career, so make sure that you fully understand this and watch the video again if you have any questions.